Welcome to the Own Your Best Life podcast. I'm May Emson, your host, leadership and mindset coach. Here, we talk all things spiritual, mindset, business, leadership, and wellness for the modern seeker who wants to align their life with purpose and inspiration. We'll cover career changes, stress management, meditation, energy, intuition, and more. Each episode holds spiritual and practical tools to help you live a life of your wildest dreams without getting burnt out along the way. Ready to live a life on your own terms? This is the Own Your Best Life podcast. So welcome, friends, to episode number 33 of the Own Your Best Life podcast. And if you have been a runner, or if you are interested in wanting to run more, or maybe you're just curious about what it's like to be a professional athlete, you will love today's episode because I am thrilled to be able to share with you a conversation that I had with Kyle Merber, my running coach, on all things running, the mindset behind running, how he got started, and just some tips and tricks for new runners. And for me, I've started running about 3 months ago on a search for a 6-minute mile, coming from a place where I haven't been running consistently. It has been really amazing to see the results I've had in that short period of time, and I think a lot of that to Kyle's amazing training plans. So a little bit about Kyle, who happens to also live in the same town that I do, and his impressive list of accomplishments. So Kyle is a professional middle distance runner for HOKA ONE ONE. Kyle graduated from Columbia University as a 10-time Ivy League champion and the American Collegiate Record holder for 1,500 meters. He has run 3 minutes, 52 seconds for the mile, and was a member of 3 world record relay teams. And while he's originally from Long Island, he now resides in Hastings-on-Hudson, New York, where he spends his free time coaching his neighbors like me. So buckle up, get ready. I hope you leave inspired to get your running shoes on and just go for a run after this. And if not, listen to this episode again. So that's how passionate I am about this topic. I know that running is a beautiful sport, something that a lot of people just either want to do a little bit more or just, maybe want to add to their repertoire. So let's get started. All right. So welcome, Kyle. I'm so excited to have you here. I think some of you may know him from me talking about him or sharing about him on social media or through my emails about my running journey that started a few months ago. But I wanted to bring him on because so many people have asked about running or have been inspired by me starting it back up and my commitment to it and the progress that I've made in the short time. And he's had so much to do with this. And for context, for those that weren't aware of how I kind of started, it felt like a bit of a lark, but one day Jay and I we had some free time and he was like, do you want to go for a run? And we haven't literally exercised together probably since the kids were born, which was like 7 years ago. So if that gives you any context, he does CrossFit, I do my own things, and we have to do all these things separately. And I haven't been running consistently since probably about 10 years ago. We used to do all these runs like in the city and when we were living in Baltimore and New York and all of that, but that all kind of went away. But we went on a run. I took him through like the trails in the woods near us. And then we ended up on the Hastings track. And I think I told you this, Kyle, that that was the first time I had been on that track since we moved to the town. And so we ran a couple laps and I'm kind of looking at the time and I'm thinking like, the last time I was like running on a track, I remember it was like in high school and ran like that 6 minute and change mile, but I was
playing sports and doing lots of things. And so I thought to myself, what would it be like if I could try to do that again? And I've been really curious about this whole process of not the actual outcome, but the person you become along the way. And if you're interested in the person you become along the way in search of a 6-minute-ish mile, then why not give it a try? And so I was like, okay, I'd be a lot more fit. I'd be consistent, right? I'd be committed. I've also, obviously I'm a coach, so I believe in the power of coaching. And I had just been reading a lot of work around like the talent code and how people get really good in really short amount of time. And one of the things was around obviously struggling, but then the second thing was around getting coaching. And so normally in the past, I would just go out like most people and probably just start running and see what I could do. Maybe go Google something on the internet and try to come up with a plan. And I kind of did that prior to talking to you. But then I was like, you know what, I should really listen to my own advice. And so I was like, who do I know that runs? And it was like you, and of course you're this like actual professional runner. And I met you like a few years ago randomly, and your beautiful wife. And I didn't think you would do it because I, went onto your Instagram page because I was trying to find you. And I was like, oh my gosh, like he's like a real athlete and this is his job. He doesn't have time probably. But I was like, well, maybe he knows someone that would be able to do some running coaching. So then you responded, you were like, sure, I would do it. Like, let's set up some time. And I've been so impressed with the results I've had. And you've been so amazing on this journey. And obviously physical health means so much more than just like what's the body, but in terms of the mindset and what you're capable of. And I think that's the draw for a lot of people too, is when they can get a handle on their body, they realize that they can probably do a lot more in life. So that's just a little bit of the context before we go into all the things about Kyle. So I think one of the main questions that my daughter Lila had for you, because she's really interested in my running journey also, is, she was like, how did he get into running? How did he get so good? So Kyle, why don't you share a little bit about your story?
Yeah, man, where to start? Well, first off, I think it's very funny how every town has a track, but it seems like only the same few people use it every single day. So I totally understand how you had not been on it until that fateful day, because it's every morning I feel like we truly do just see the same few people out there, and everyone's taxes is paying for the track. So hopefully more people come out. But yeah, I started actually because I met a professional runner, funny enough. And it was after the 1996 Atlanta Olympics. I met Derek Atkins, who was the Olympic gold medalist for the hurdles. And he was from my hometown, and he came back after he won the gold medal and spoke at my school. And I left inspired, and I thought it sounded amazing. And, the medal was really shiny, and I wanted medals. And so I signed up because I'd, been introduced to by him. I think everyone knew baseball and soccer, but for a lot of young athletes, I don't think they necessarily know that there is another sport out there in which you can just do your favorite thing, which is chasing after your friends.
And what kept you going, right? I think like you started so young. So how did you just keep persisting and deciding that this was your thing?
Yeah, I think there's two sides of it. Is you get competitive, and I always say you kind of get addicted to smaller numbers, where once you run a 7-minute mile, you want to run a 6-minute mile. Once you run a 6-minute mile, you want to run a 5-minute mile. And the thing that's so nice about running is it's not a perfect science, but for the most part, it's what you put in, you get out. And not everything in life is so direct of a correlation. And I found that if I worked really hard and committed myself to it, that I would improve. And that, was simple and easy. And it put, it ultimately the responsibility on myself. You're not relying on teammates or the goalie not letting in the ball behind you. So I really like that aspect of it. And then the other part of it is it just becomes a lifestyle where you wake up every single day and it's what you do. It's like brushing your teeth. You don't have to think about it. It's not, am I going to go for a run today? Eventually it's to the point where obviously I'm going for a run.
Yeah. And you exercise pretty much every day, right?
Yeah. And that's what's so funny is like, I don't even think of running as exercising. Like, it's just like you eat food every single day, and so I do. And I also bike and I go to the gym, a number of days a week. And I think of that more as like exercise, but my running is, I just run. It's not, there's no thought involved in it. It's completely involuntary.
It's so amazing because I do think a lot of people struggle with the idea of consistency. And I remember maybe it was like a year or two ago where I was like, I'm going to exercise every single day. And I really believe in the principle of like, what's the one decision you can make that would eliminate thousands of decisions? And for me, I remember there being a point where I'd be like, is today the day I'm supposed to go? I mean, is it supposed to be like 3 days a week you work out, or is it 5? And this person says it's 6 and someone else says it's 7. And then I had that thought where I was like, this shouldn't be something you don't do, right? Like moving your body is a natural thing. I'm not saying everyone has to do something like crazy intense every single day, but I was like, I should be able to walk 30 minutes at the minimum. So I do think that the baseline has gotten so low because we're so sedentary that even just moving seems like a big lift. And so
I think that's the problem is like, we always want to do so much, and really you just have to start really small. Like start with an easy walk. And once you walk every single day, then, throw in a little running into the mix. But it's just the idea of building that routine and making it part of what you do every single day, rather than it's almost harder to do it just a few days a week, because then you have to remember to do it. If you do something every single day, it's, it's second nature.
So how would you start someone off that hasn't been running in a while? Because I know, like, for example, when I reached out and I was like, so I want to do this like 600-mile thing, and hey, I haven't been running in like years, kind of what were your first thoughts that went through your head?
Yeah, I think the first thing that you have to do is set realistic goals. I think if you haven't been running ever in years, you can't be like, I want to run a marathon like next week. Because, or, I want to run a marathon in under 3 hours. It's just like, there's so many steps along the way to get there, and you don't want to get discouraged too early. Like you really want to have that positive reinforcement, and you want to enjoy the process, and you don't want the task to be so monumental and therefore daunting. You want something that you can wrap your mind around. And I think the thing that we did in the beginning that was really important was you just put your shoes on every single day. And sometimes that meant go for a walk, and sometimes that meant go for a bike ride, or sometimes that meant do yoga. But every single day you were exercising, and maybe that first week you only did a few runs. And now, without you even realizing it, I have you running every single day, and there was no definitive moment where it was a decision like, hey, you know what, I think you're ready to run every single day. But it just slowly happened, but we tricked you into getting there. And I think that's a really important part of the process, is not necessarily looking so far down the line that it seems like an impossible place to get. Instead, just like, what do you have to do today? You got to put your shoes on and go outside for 20 minutes. And we'll pick up the pace, and you'll get out there longer and longer in due time. But in the immediate, just go outside every day.
Yeah. And I think that when I first started, I remember saying to you, like, I just don't want to get injured, because that's been my like MO. I am like, okay, I got to do this thing, and I'm just going to like really do it. And then I would injure myself, and I'd like hurt myself, or something would happen like every single time. And so one of the amazing things for me, so again, it's been like, I don't know, 3-ish months and maybe a week. And it doesn't seem like that long, but I feel like I've achieved a lot in that time period in terms of where I started to where I am now, but I haven't gotten injured. I mean, I came in with a bit of a sore ankle because I had rolled my ankle like earlier, but that to me has been pretty amazing. So how do you keep people, and I remember this because you're like, you have to recover. How do you keep people from injuring themselves?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, if you run long enough for so many years, injuries are going to happen. It's part of the game, and it's kind of how you manage them. And you do what you can to avoid them. But ultimately, the idea would be not to overreach in the beginning and really build into things. I think if we looked back on some of the workouts you did in a few months ago, you would laugh at trying to do them now. It'd be so easy compared to what you're capable of doing. And so I think that's a really important part of it. And then I also think the recovery, where you don't necessarily have to work out every single day. And I think that's a difficult, concept for a lot of people to grasp. And when I say workout, I mean work out hard. People outside of the sport think that maybe we're on the track ripping intervals every single day. And in truth, we do that 2 times a week, maybe 3 days a week at the most. And the reason is because the recovery is when your body builds back stronger with sleep and nutrition. And that rest allows your muscles to grow. And if you work out every single day, and again, I say work out to mean intervals, then you're constantly beating your body up and never giving it time to regenerate. And so learning to run easy, which it's funny, to most people, going for a 30-minute run is working out. I worked out today, but I think now you even have that concept where it's like, that's not a workout. Like, you're working out, you're exercising for the day, but like, it's easy. You come inside and you feel good and you're not on the ground at any point. We save those for the track days. And so I think having the ability for every day not to be an all-out effort and to have varied intensity levels makes it sustainable over a long period of time.
Yeah. As you were talking about like what feels easy and what doesn't feel easy, I think part of the thing that happened along the way is this identity shift to be like, well, you're now a runner. I remember Jay saying that once. He was like, you're like a runner now. Like, you just go and run and you do these workouts and they're kind of hard. And I remember being like, oh, I guess so. And one of the quickest ways for us to shift, behaviors we don't want to have to behaviors we want to have, or to make big changes in our lives, is to shift the identity. But it's also one of like the hardest things for people to do because, for example, they see you and they're like, well, you're a runner. So of course, it's easy, or it's fun, or you're good at it. And that in between really sucks for a lot of people because, you're not good in the beginning, or you're really slow, or it hurts, and you don't see yourself as this person. So what would you say to people who are trying to figure out that identity shift in terms of like, am I a runner? Am I not a runner? I got a question from someone saying like, at what point did you consider yourself a runner? And I was like, I don't know if she's asking me or him. But for me, I always thought of fitness as like a point in time, right? Like, if I stop doing everything tomorrow, I'm not fit. So it's only whatever I'm doing really like today, really, kind of that matters. But I get that when you say I'm a runner, then you suddenly adopt all these habits and be like, well, runners run and have this kind of habit and would take care of their bodies in this way. So your identity, how do you think of it in terms of you being an athlete or a runner or all of those things?
Yeah, I think a lot of people probably suffer from that imposter syndrome in all aspects of their life. And it's like, you're not a runner until you run. And then once you run, that's it. And you don't have to run every single day to be a runner. It's like, I don't necessarily, take pictures every single day, but that still means photography is a hobby. And therefore, there's no rule that states you're in or you're out or a certain time. Like, I think that people would maybe think there's a higher level of gatekeeping than there is, but in truth, I think it's a really welcoming sport. And I think when people love it, they really want to share it with others and therefore encourage people to join them. And, I'm sure that in the beginning, you're just running and it's all about you. And then, you meet a few other runners and then all of a sudden you're talking about running a little bit more. And then, you pick up a magazine and you read a couple articles online, and now your Instagram all of a sudden has a ton of running pictures in your explore page, and like you get sucked into this culture and you're thinking about it, you're posting on Strava, and you're like, all of a sudden it's like it snowballs, and the more you engage, the deeper it goes and the more you get out of it and you like it more and more. But in much the way that maybe new runners feel like, oh, like if I go to the track and I try to run, like other people there are going to judge me. But people feel that at the gym all the time. And I'll tell you, I sometimes feel like I don't belong in certain gyms or in certain races. I'll look around and be like, I can't believe I'm in this race, and so it always happens. And until you belong there if you're there. And that's really what it comes down to.
I remember when it was, I think, the first conversation we had, and I remember this because I was like, that was really meaningful, was you were saying, hey, at any point, if you just don't want to do this anymore, you're not feeling it, just let me know. My hope is that, that you learn to love this. And I was like, that's so interesting, because sometimes you think people get jaded after a certain period of time of doing anything, where maybe they see it as their job or they don't see it as a passion anymore. So how did you stay in love with running? You seem to have like such a good attitude around the enjoyment of it. Is that something you've had to work on, or have you had to consciously bring it back, or is it just something that's always been there?
Yeah, I think it naturally ebbs and flows at different points. Like sometimes I'm completely entrenched and obsessed with it. And then other times, I have to drag myself out the door like everyone else a little bit. It's probably more so when the weather's real crappy or I'm feeling extra tired. But, those are the moments that kind of define you and are one of the things that make running and any passion really worth it, is the days that you don't want to do it. Like that defines you. Like you have to get up and go to work every single day because someone is holding you accountable. And for me, it's like, my body's holding me accountable. Like you'll know if I didn't do my running like that day, or if I took a week off, like you'll feel it. And you have no one really holding you to it except yourself. And except that's where coaches come in. And that's, I think, the big benefit that you're experiencing with us working together is if you decided not to run one day, I would be like, what do you mean? I told you to do that. Like the whole point is that you do it. And like, so now you're answering to someone else, and that takes out the question of, should I do it? Or I'm tired, maybe I'll just sleep in. And it puts it on someone else because you don't want to disappoint someone who's counting on you to show up and get the work in.
The idea of why are you doing this? Who are you doing it for? Right? Like raising your level of like necessity to do it is why coaching, I think, is so effective. I will say I have not missed any
even on vacation,
any of the prescribed workouts. And I remember this because even when I was like a student athlete in like high school or middle school, I remember the main differentiation between my success and anything else was just I did what people asked me to do. And I didn't realize then that most people don't execute, right? They don't follow through on things.
Yeah.
And I just didn't even think that was an option. Like I was just like, well, if the coach said when it's not during the season that you should be doing all these things, I would go and do all these things. And I remember I was literally like the worst probably player. I came to everything super late. Like my parents weren't really into sports. Like the Asian community doesn't really, I would say, prioritize athleticism. And I remember I came to sports just the same kind of way, where I was just like, oh, let me just try this thing. I was the person you would put in after you knew that the game was pretty set. But then I ended up doing really, really well because I literally just did what people asked me to do. When we keep our own word to ourselves, that's like such a powerful thing. And I think that for a lot of people, they stop working out or they stop running or they give up because they don't want to fail again, right? They don't want to be like, here's another thing that I tried, but I didn't, really do well at. So how would you recommend that people stay consistent? Aside from, obviously they can work with a coach, which is a number one strategy. One of the reasons I was like, okay, if I want to do this well, I'm going to work with someone. But how else would you recommend they stay consistent?
Yeah, I think setting the short-term goals is a really important thing where, as we were saying, like running a 6-minute mile or doing a marathon is really tough, but also, having a checklist of the small things you want to accomplish every single week. And you can have a reward system even. You can say, if I run 6 days in a row, then on that 7th day, I don't need to run. And just playing little games with yourself to get you there. And I think the consistency, it's hard. And that's where it helps to have a little bit of a support unit. Having friends to run with, I think, is a really important thing. It's especially as the weather turns, like being able to meet up with someone else and knowing that if you don't show up, that they're going to be left out there in the cold waiting and wondering where you are. So I think also then communicating to other people in your life about what you're trying to do keeps you accountable and honest, where you're, if you're telling everyone, I'm running every day this week, and then, Thursday comes and you don't want to go for a run, you're like, well, I told everyone I was gonna like stick to this schedule. I guess I have to.
It's funny. I did this behavioral psychology or behavioral economics course when I was doing my MBA at Columbia, and I know you went to Columbia too. And it was one of my favorite classes because it was around the psychology of like how people make a lot of these decisions. And one of them is exactly what you were saying, which is committing openly, right? It's the idea of marriage vows and why we do it with all these people around us. It doesn't keep everyone from, not dissolving their marriage, but I think it goes a longer way towards doing it. And I know for me, when I started telling people that I was trying to do what seemed like kind of a ridiculous thing, like they were like, what? Why? And I was like, oh, now that I said it, I really have to like, try to do it. And they remember what I said. And I wrote this in an email. So I do think that that whole accountability and communicating aspect. So everyone who's listening, go find yourself a person like Kyle to hold you accountable to the thing. And tell everyone that you're doing this if it is something that you want to do. But okay, so as we talk about, the love of running or enjoyment, I had a question from a listener who had said, no matter how often I run or for how long, I'm still so slow and it has not become fun or easy. How do I get to the point where I enjoy running and it becomes something I want to do? And I'll say that that's not the only comment I've gotten, because other people will, sometimes I'll post being like, oh my gosh, I just finished the time trial and I beat my time, or I did it. And they're like, you make it look so fun. And I remember keep thinking like, why do people keep talking about it? But I think there's something there. So would love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think one strategy would be to try running in new places. And I think a lot of people just run straight from their house every single day, and you already know those roads and that place. And so it's a little monotonous and repetitive, but sometimes just driving 5 minutes to a trail can make a big difference. One, it kind of earmarks it in the day as like an important thing that you're trying to do, but also it's a change of scenery, and the aspects of exploring is a lot of fun for people. So I think that's definitely something to try. I also think that when you go for a run, you don't have to run the whole time. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with. And I know that I've experienced this in my introduction to swimming. And I'm not a big swimmer, but I've swam a decent bit in my life because of injuries and running. And so I would have to get in the pool to cross train. And I felt like every time I got in the pool, I would just start by swimming as hard as I could until I was like on the verge of drowning. And then it was like 5 minutes in and I was like, that was not enough time. Like I need to swim way longer. And breaking it up into intervals, I think was a really important step for me to take, where, all right, I'll swim there and back, then I'll rest 30 seconds. I'll swim there and back, I'll rest 30 seconds. I'll swim there and back, to rest 30 seconds. And before I know it, my ability to go much longer was suddenly, and got the effect that I wanted. I was able to swim for an hour. And I think with running, you go out to the trail and you don't need to run for 30 minutes. You can run for a minute, and then you can just walk for a minute or two. And then you can just you can run for a minute, you can walk for a minute. And before you know it, you'll have been out there for a long time. And maybe you don't completely exhaust yourself, or you have a better control of how tired you're making yourself. And you'll be able to play with those variables and slowly dial it up until eventually you are just running for 30 minutes straight and you're not hating every second of it.
Yeah, I remember when I first saw like what you had sent me in terms of like training plans, and it included breaks, and I was just like, oh, what a novel concept. I remember
you don't need those now.
No, I don't. Yeah. But I remember just thinking that, being like, oh, you don't have to just go super hard and kill yourself every single time, and then you wonder why it doesn't feel good or it doesn't feel easy. So you mentioned amazing locations or finding a place that's maybe different than what you normally do. What are some of your favorite places to go running, either locally or places that you've been to that you remember more because you actually ran there?
Yeah, so we're really lucky here in Hastings because we have some great running right in our backyard. And I probably have kept some spots secret from you that I can introduce you to. But so we have the Aqueduct Trail right here, which is great. And we also have a bike path, so you get to mix it up a little bit. But in Westchester, one of the best spots is just a little bit north of here is Rockefeller State Park. And when you go in there, it's like a completely different world. And it's shocking that somewhere so big can be so close to New York City, because you're really just lost out there in nature. And so that's probably one of my favorite spots to run, although it's hilly. And then I always say my favorite place to run in the world is Acadia National Park in Maine.
Ooh.
Yeah, out near Bar Harbor. And that's just, really wide dirt carriage roads with unbelievable views and gentle long hills. And yes, generally the weather is pretty good there in the summer. So that's if I could go for a run anywhere, that would be it.
Amazing. I noticed you didn't mention any like super hot and warm locales.
Yeah, I've done some runs in the desert. It's not as much fun.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned this to you, but I have a little bit of this fear of like running in the cold. I think I believe that like somehow my lungs shrink and they start to hurt more, but I'm committed to continuing my running. So what would you recommend in terms of like gear in general for people who are starting to run? I think a lot of times we get caught up in the like, what do I have to buy or what do I have to have or get in order to start running? So I'm interested in like the basics, but very selfishly, I'm also interested in recommendations for like good gear to be prepared for different kinds of weather, things like that, or your favorite things.
Yeah, I think the one thing, if you're ever going to start, is to make sure that you have a good pair of shoes. And I always recommend people go to like their local running store, like a specialty store, not necessarily a Dick's or something, like somewhere where the person selling you the shoes is a runner themselves, and they can advise you, and you can try on different things and get fit for a shoe that works for you, because you're going to spend a lot of time in them. And so having the right pair is important. And then from there, it's, I think the great thing about running is like, you don't really need that much. It's a personal comfort thing. I know in the winter, I always prefer to layer rather than wearing like one big heavy coat. I'd rather wear like 4 thin shirts, and it gives me the ability to kind of strip down if I'm getting warm. And the only downside is laundry. It piles up a little quicker. But my one secret that I'll give you for winter running is mittens are much, much warmer than gloves.
Oh, yes.
So
okay.
that's
I will have
key.
to get mittens.
Yeah.
I'm just like shoving my hand in my shirt.
Yeah. And then, what I should also mention is the watch. And
Yes.
I think a lot of people want to get the fanciest GPS watch that they can find that has all these gizmos and gadgets attached to it, and there's so many settings. But I think for the most part, it's like, keep it relatively simple. If you want to get the distance and the pace and the time, that's good. But also, the ability to just not be worrying about every button, and just hit start and then hit stop, and like, figure out what you did afterwards rather than playing with it the whole time. I think sometimes it's overcomplicated.
Yeah. And I will say for anyone who's listening that the only thing that I have purchased is a new pair of shoes. That was mainly because I left mine behind once when we were going out to Montauk. So I stopped by a local running store on the way over there and bought a new pair, which probably I was due for anyways.
Yeah.
What did I end up getting? I think it was the HOKA Clifton 7s. I think you had recommended those. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love them. But I had a watch. I had an Apple Watch, so I used that. You did say to download Strava, which I wasn't familiar with, but apparently for anyone who isn't aware of Strava, like a lot of people are on Strava doing all sorts of things. So would you recommend Strava as well for most people?
Yeah, because I think it comes back to that accountability issue where, your workouts are being uploaded, and they're a place for you to go back and track your progress as well. And you can see what you've done in the past. I also think like keeping mini journals is important. And so, I personally use Strava to just say how I felt and what I did, and kind of keep track of, how my body is responding to the things that I'm doing. And so you get an idea better of what works and what doesn't when you're writing about it.
Okay. And then I wanted to also talk to you about nutrition. I remember once we were meeting up for a time trial, and you mentioned like the night before, like, oh, like, what are you, eating before you go running? And I'm like, I'm not eating anything. And you were like, what about drinking? And I was like, I'm not drinking anything. And you were just like, I think you really need to drink a little bit, and maybe you'll get to a point where you can eat some food beforehand, which I do now. And I do drink like a big glass of water when I wake up. But why don't we talk a little bit about food and hydration? What do you recommend?
Yeah, I think the number one piece of advice I always give to people on nutrition is, if you're cooking your food, then you know what you're putting in your body. And so that doesn't mean never eat out. I'm certainly guilty of that, but the more food that you're preparing yourself, the better. And I think that I don't have an extremely strict diet personally. And I know that definitely varies from person to person. But if I'm hungry, I eat, and that's kind of my schedule. And when I'm full, I stop, and I'm constantly drinking water, and I make sure I kind of have boxes that I like to tick. So it's like, did I get enough protein? Did I get my fruit? Did I get my vegetables? And at the end of the day, it's kind of like you mentally add it all up and make sure you hit everything. And then if you want to reward yourself with some ice cream, then you deserve it because you got your run in that day.
And so do you follow any kind of nutrition plan, or is it kind of like you've got it dialed in now, so you don't really do anything specific, but you kind of know what your body needs and when?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is I know what my body likes to have before runs. So, some people might be able to eat eggs right before they step out for a run. Personally, for me, it's more oatmeal and fruit, and like that works for me. And finding what sits well in your stomach, and that's going to be an individual challenge. And then the other side of things is when you finish running, you need to replenish. I know for some people, they finish exercising and maybe they don't have that hunger yet, but it's still really important to feed your body because it's a furnace, it's burning hot right now. And those calories and that nutrition is what's going to allow your muscles to rebuild and come back stronger.
Yeah, I think that's something I've started noticing more around that like 30-minute window after I run. If I don't put something in my body, I'll start to feel it like an hour or so later, that I feel like a little more lightheaded or a little weaker.
You only have to make that mistake a couple times and you don't make it ever again.
Do you do like shakes? Do you eat mostly whole foods? Like, kind of, how do you think about the foods that you eat?
Yeah, it definitely varies. I'd say, that I'm training really hard when I'm juicing and making shakes. That's kind of like the cue. My wife will recognize that I've dialed things up a little bit when I start doing that. But for the most part, it's like there's no strict diet. The biggest challenge is for me personally to make sure I'm getting enough. And as I said, like you'll feel it. But when you're not getting enough, you'll be more tired than you're used to or want to be.
All right. So I'm going to transition into a bit of the anxiety around running. And I know that, maybe if you're starting to run, you don't feel as much anxiety, or maybe you do because you're like, it's really painful. In general, I really enjoy working out. Like, I think I've gotten to a point in my life where if I don't, I feel like something's off. So I was really surprised when like the time trial thing popped up and I was like, wait, what is this? And you're like, yeah, we're going to actually try to run really hard. And then I suddenly had this anxiety around this thing that I had chosen to, put into my life. So I talked to you a little bit about this, right? Because I remember like the night before I didn't sleep really well. You were all like, woo, that's great. So how do you think about anxiety before big events or before things that you're trying to do or that you have a goal for? How do you manage some of that in anticipation?
Yeah, I think it's the way you respond to it that's really important. So everyone's going to get nervous when there's something that's really important to them. And I think some people, it's kind of like a fight or flight response that they have. And some people almost push off, be like, this doesn't matter. Like, this isn't important. Forget about it. Like, it doesn't matter how I perform. And I think wrong approach to it, because it is important and you've put a lot of work and you've put a lot of effort into accomplishing something. So instead, it's how do I take that nervous energy and turn it into excitement and make it a positive feeling to have, because that adrenaline can be really powerful.
That was one of the shifts I had to make, was when I suddenly remembered that I chose this, right? And that I was like, I chose to do this. And I think going back to the basic, which is like, I have legs and I can move, and I'm lucky enough to have time to run or to even have something like this that I'm trying to do, is all like so much gratitude for, or so much appreciation for, or just like remembering, right? Like, wow, I'm healthy enough to do these things. Maybe when I'm 90 years old, I won't be, right? Maybe I will be. So I think that was a big shift for me. And it was helpful to have some things. I think sometimes we don't challenge ourselves enough in our lives. Maybe it's different when you are a professional athlete and your job is constantly, to push these new boundaries. I think for most normal individuals, they want to be good. So they've gotten to a place where they've established themselves and they are considered good. And they're not always facing as much of that push or that strain in their lives. And I think that's what I realized. I was like, I didn't have something like this where it was so challenging for me to feel such a large amount of anxiety for, even though it was completely self-imposed. So how do you deal with this aspect of that vulnerability of showing up to something maybe as a beginner? What would you, I don't know where in your life do you feel you're still a beginner, but if you have advice also for people who are starting to run and feel like that kind of, I'm not really good at this, so why bother?
Yeah, I think the important thing to remember is that everyone was a beginner at one time, and you're not being compared to anyone else. And I know personally, like I'm a competitive person, but I'm competitive with only myself, and which is an interesting perspective maybe for a professional athlete to say, but I'm way interested in being the best version of myself than I am beating someone else's best version of themselves. And so when you show up, all you have to do is be better than you've ever been before. And if you keep improving and you're progressing, then, where you sit in the scheme, in like the grand scheme of things in regards to the rest of the population, you'll keep improving and you'll move up the ladder, but ultimately you can't control that. You can only control your own performance. And so I think in a way that takes a little bit of pressure off, but also puts a lot of the responsibility on your own shoulders, because it's not up to what anyone else is doing. It's just, what can you do?
Yeah. And I think that also surprised me, because when we would work together, like, you would be the person I'd be comparing myself to, because I didn't have that many other people on Strava. So it'd be like, and then Kyle went for a run today for like 1,000 miles at like 2-minute mile pace. And I'd be like, oh yeah, that's also possible.
But I hope that I'm at the point where you're not comparing, like, I feel like when we're doing a time trial or something, I'm running next to you. Like, I'm a ghost. Like, don't even think about me. Like, you're not going to beat me. So just focus on you.
No, I know. I mean, I think the main thing was just this idea of, I think the question that came to mind was like, why do we compare? Right? Like, just like you said, like, why do we even compare? Like, why would I compare to you when, this is what you do, or this, like, there's a whole reason why you've done all the things in your life, and you've gotten to where you are, is because you've been working on this really hard. So it's not some like random thing that happened. But I think a lot of people fall into that, where they forget that they don't know, right, the whole story, or they're just comparing to someone's work that they've been doing for years. And they're just like, oh, I'm starting, and why am I not as good as this person who's doing this? And it's, of course, ridiculous. But I think it also stops, right, a lot of people from pursuing anything that they may not be necessarily like really good at or the best at.
Yeah, it's just that then prevents your growth, I think. That's why I think it's so important to keep that training log and to have your own benchmarks of which you're comparing yourself to, because then you have, a lens by which to see how much you're doing compared to what you were doing, and find encouragement in that, as opposed to discouragement in seeing what those who've done it forever are doing. It's like, as long as you're improving, that should be reason enough to tell you to keep going.
Yeah. And so when you started working with me, what would you say, like, how do you approach coaching people in terms of running?
Yeah, I think you have to, and something that we do a lot with giving you the goals is it's got to be something that you can do. I think the number one fear that I always have is if I give you something that's too hard, that you'll walk away discouraged. And so, the times that I often give you, I want to be attainable. Like, I want you to be able to hit them. And then if you feel good and you're comfortable doing them, then it's up to you to push the boundaries even further. And I think also being that sounding board is really important, and having, be there to listen and hear how you're feeling, and being able to tweak and make those adjustments without you even necessarily realizing what's being done behind the scenes. So you being able to process those little details and effectively put them into practice without you knowing what I'm doing, like kind of being that omnipotent, like, coach up top who's playing with the puppets, and I'm toying around with different things, and before you even know it, you're way faster than you've ever been, and you don't know how we got there.
Yeah. And I was thinking that too, because I was like that. So when I started, and I didn't even run a mile before we started fully. I think, I'm not saying I couldn't have, but I wasn't doing that time trial to figure it out. But I do think I was, like, if I tried, I probably would have been maybe closer to a 9-minute mile between like 8:30 and 9. And then, I don't know, was it last week or the week before? It was like 6:54, right? So that was a lot for me. It felt like a lot has changed in a really short amount of time. So, like, how do you craft workouts?
Yeah, well, so it's all in comparison to what you've done before, and just dialing it up a little bit. There's 3 main variables that we play with. It's like the amount of distance you're running, how fast you're doing it, and the amount of rest that you're getting. And you're just playing with these 3 variables to make things a little bit harder than they once were. And so for me, it's often, all right, I saw you do this a few weeks ago, and so I know you're capable of that, but if I want you to improve, then you're gonna have to do a little bit more. And so you change those variables just a little bit, so that way you're constantly running a little further, a little faster, and not needing as much rest. And the other thing that I think that we've learned together is that you're able to push yourself way, way harder now than I think you realized that you were capable of. It's one thing, like, of course your fitness has gotten a lot better and you're a better runner, but also your ability to dig down deeper and find your ability to manage pain and squeeze every last drop out of yourself. Like, that's improved tenfold.
I remember you saying, well, the expectation is that you should be on the floor afterwards. And I was like, oh, okay. Now I know what we're going after. So
yeah.
So
there should be nothing left. Yeah. But it's a learned ability. You can't do that if you've never tested that before. If you've never been there, then you don't know what it feels like. But then once you've done it a few times, you know what you have to do to make that an experience that is weirdly enjoyable.
Yeah. And when we got the listener question about like the enjoyment part of it, what came into my mind was almost this idea of how do we make the discomfort enjoyable? Because when you can unlock that in your life, like in all the ways, right? Like a really difficult conversation, a really awkward moment, whatever it is, then it's almost like everything is possible, because you realize that, it's not going to kill you, that you could do it, that you just do it. So I think when we were talking about when I did my first mile, I was like in that third lap, and it just felt like my body went numb and my lower half lost some of its feeling. And I remember thinking, I don't think this is normal, like as I was running. But afterwards, you were just like, oh yeah, that just happens. That was also really helpful to know, because then you're just like, oh, all of the things I'm experiencing, even if it's really painful or weird, are normal. Therefore, that means I can do it and nothing's actually wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. I think having that like shared identity or that shared experience with other people, and knowing that like you're not the weird one for feeling terrible, is a weirdly comforting thing to be aware of.
Yeah. So how have you increased like your capability to manage pain or discomfort or to run through it? Because I remember you talking about it, and I thought that was really interesting, because you were like, you just get better at managing that part of it.
Yeah, I think simply it's just like you have to do it. Like you learn it by doing it. And there's different sorts of pain and different ways to kind of experience it, as we know in running and in probably life. But the more time you've done it and then seen that you can handle it and survive and bounce back from it, then you stop fearing it and you can keep doing it, and you can learn to embrace it a little bit more. And, therefore, like you can sit in that pain a little bit longer, and you can grab a little bit more out of each lap or every step that you take. So, you just have to do it. You have to do it, and then you know it.
Yeah. Amazing. And I know you talk about like recovery as part of the process. We haven't talked about it that much, in terms of like my own growth or progress, but you work with a company, or you help start a company, is it Prem Vita?
Yeah.
Where you guys create like massage guns. So tell me about the massage gun. Why is it something that you've gotten really interested in?
Yeah. So I started a company with a friend of mine. Then we make recovery tools. And so we have like a vibrating massage roller.
Ooh.
And then also a mini massage gun. And we're both runners. And so, we have dealt with our fair share of injuries and soreness. And so finding ways to help manage that part of running and all things exercise related. And so it's been a really fun journey that we're on. And, I'm a big fan of our product. I use it religiously, which, I think is all the endorsement that you need. Is if you're using it yourself, then you see the value in it. But yeah, it's just, an added tool into the arsenal of like things you can do. Like you can sleep, you can run easy, you can eat well. And, there's stretching and there's gym work, and there are these little tools out there like a massage gun that can help your muscles bounce back stronger and stay loose. So yeah, fun side project.
So so say I'm going to buy one of these things. When would I use them, and how would I use them?
Yeah. So I really, it doesn't take that much energy to use. So it's probably my favorite thing to do when I first wake up in the morning, when like, you don't necessarily want to get down on the ground and do all your exercises yet. And you don't want, stretching takes too much energy, and you just want to read the paper and just kind of have the massage gun warming you up. And then when, that's like the first thing that I do in my process in getting ready to run. And then after a run, once you've used your body, you kind of recognize like some days it's like, oh, my calf actually felt terrible today. And you can kind of pinpoint your problem areas. And then afterwards, that's when it's time to address it, because you have to think about the future. What's going to hurt tomorrow if I don't do something about it today? And so, yeah, you kind of sandwich the run with the massage gun and stretching and, everything that goes into keeping your body healthy.
Yeah, because I got Jay one of those like really large ones, but to be honest, it's like it's
a lot.
It's like a lot. It's like a jackhammer, and it's it's also heavy, right? So it's not really that portable.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things I liked about yours. It's that it's way smaller and still effective, but it's not like this giant thing that you're carrying around everywhere.
Yeah, that, ours is the size of an iPhone. And the idea, I think, ultimately was like, some of the big jackhammers on the market are really intimidating. And maybe for like an NFL football player, that's what they need. But for most people out there, where we don't have that same need to, lug something like that around. And instead, like, if you're going somewhere, it fits in your pocket if you need it. And it's just like a quick secret tool that you have to make yourself feel good.
Okay, super cool. So before we wrap up, of course, I might get questions about this, so I want to make sure that I ask this, but are you taking on new people to coach? Do they have to be running 6-minute miles? Like, do they need to be elite athletes? Obviously, I'm not, but what's your take on coaching right now?
Yeah. So, it's funny. Like, I don't think of coaching as my profession. It's just a hobby. Like, I love doing it and I love seeing you progress and people like you. But yeah, so, I am definitely always taking on people to help if they have the right attitude and are ready to get faster. And so, yeah, I mean, you can, if anyone is interested, you can DM me on Instagram and we can start the conversation. But, it's always very fun just to see people get better and to be a part of that process.
Yeah. And I think that there's been nothing, I think, that you can compare to having someone outside of yourself see yourself. I think that I've progressed a ton, but what would you say has been my keys to success from your point of view?
I think the key to your success has been just your consistency. I've been really pleasantly surprised with how into it you've gotten. I feel like in the beginning, it was almost like, you needed that push out the door every single day. And now it's just like, you're fully in, you've bought into the program, like you believe in it and you're enjoying it. I feel like now if I didn't tell you to run one day, it wouldn't matter. Like, you would still go for a run.
Yeah, that's true. I never thought about that. But yeah, I think there is a shift that happens in the beginning where you're like, am I doing this thing? Am I doing this thing? But there's nothing, I think, like seeing, like you said, progress or those small wins for you to start feeling like, oh yeah, there's something here, or I like kind of what I'm seeing here. And I think the biggest thing was when I started thinking about whether I want to keep doing this or not, I was, again, that kind of identity shift, which was, you know what, this is something really fun. I would love for this to be something I just do always, so that it's not, okay, am I going to make it through the next week or not, right? Because then you just assume, okay, I'm just going to keep doing this always, and I kind of no matter what. So let's just think about it more as like a longer term enjoyable thing instead of this, I just got to get through the next week and it'll all be okay.
Yeah. No, you want to do it for life. Like, it's not just, it's not a season. It's not, you hit your goal and then that's it. Like, when you hit your goal, it's time to make new goals.
Yeah. Amazing. All right. So thank you so much, Kyle, for coming on today. I wanted to thank you because you've been super patient, and you coach a few other people, and I think we would all agree that you're such a good person, as well as someone that, is committed and cares. And obviously you wouldn't be doing this if you didn't care about people or watching people progress. So thank you so much. I don't know how I randomly found you in my life, but I'm so glad that it happened. And maybe when we're out of this weird physical distancing thing, we'll have you guys all over for dinner again one day and be able to kind of get the community going and start the Hastings Track Club founded by Kyle.
Yeah. No, thanks so much. I love it. We're having a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah. Okay, so where can people find you? What are all your handles and all the things?
Yeah, on Instagram, I am Kyle Merber, and on Twitter, I am The Real Merb. And yeah, pretty active. I try to stay relatively active on social.
Okay, guys, so go follow him. He's always posting about random bike rides where he's going for hundreds of miles randomly, which feels like hundreds of miles to me. And you are pretty funny on social media too. So it's always very entertaining to keep track of what you're doing.
Thank you.
Amazing. All right. Thank you so much again, Kyle. I'm so glad we were able to connect. Guys, I think doing a 5K Thanksgiving weekend. That's what Kyle and I had talked about. So if you guys want to join in on the fun, I guess let me know and maybe we can all do something together. What are you going to be doing over Thanksgiving weekend?
We're going to be going home to my parents' house on Long Island, and then I'll probably have to come back to help you guys out on some 5Ks.
All right. So thanks again. And we are all signing off now.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Thanks so much for joining us this week on Own Your Best Life. Make sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts so that you'll never miss a show. And while you're at it, can you please rate and review on iTunes? I would so appreciate it. Share it with a friend, take a screenshot of it, and tag @MayEmson. This helps continue to get the word out. For more show notes and resources, check out www.mayemson.com. It'll have all the links to everything you heard here today. Thanks so much for listening. It's time to own your best life.